So, a little bit more review on some of the Democratic debate highlights. One particular clip has stood out to me, and I said, you know what, before I call it a night and turn in, make some more videos later on after I get up possibly again, I've got to cover this one first. So, Mayor Pete and Tulsi Gabbard had some exchanges during the debate. Now, of course, a lot of you know out there, if you've been watching my videos, what my stance is on Mayor Pete. To me, I think that the DNC, the status quo, and the corporate Democrats kind of are banking on Mayor Pete as possibly the outsider that not many people know a whole lot about. And so if the other corporate Democrats can't quite resonate, Mayor Pete possibly can. He's very elegant in the way he speaks. His etiquette's very, very great. Obviously, he's able to speak all these different languages so he can appeal to different, races, Hey, there's a lot of things that they can kind of bank on with this guy. And especially with the fact that he's such an unknown in politics, just because the only thing he's ever done is a mayor, it's kind of hard to go after some of his policy in a way you could go after Joe Biden, Warren, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and some of those people, Amy Klobuchar. Okay, it makes it more difficult, let's say. Okay, but there's still plenty of substance matter there if you know where to look for it, and if you don't mind just taking the gloves off. So with that being said, let's just take a look at this exchange between Tulsi and Mayor Pete.
But I want to get back to Pete Buttigieg and his comment about experience. Pete, you'll agree that the service that we both have provided to our country as veterans by itself does not qualify us to serve as commander-in-chief. I think the most recent example of your inexperience in national security and foreign policy came from your recent careless statement about how you as president would be willing to send our troops to Mexico to fight the cartels. As commander-in-chief, leader of our armed forces, I bring extensive experience serving for 7 years in Congress, on the Foreign Affairs Committee, on the Armed Services Committee, on the Homeland Security Committee, meeting with leaders of countries around the world, working with military commanders of different commands, dealing with high-level national security briefings, understanding what's necessary, the preparation that I've gotten to walk in on day one to serve as Commander-in-Chief.
Congresswoman, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'll allow you to respond.
I know that it's par for the course in Washington to take remarks out of context, but that is outlandish even by the standards of today's politics.
Are you saying that you didn't say that?
I was talking about U.S.-Mexico cooperation. We've been doing security cooperation with Mexico for years, with law enforcement cooperation and a military relationship that could continue to be developed with training relationships, for example. Do you seriously think anybody on this stage is proposing invading Mexico?
That's not what I said.
I'm talking about building up alliances. And if your question is about experience, let's also talk about judgment. One of the foreign leaders you mentioned meeting was Bashar.
I know where that's going, and I've got to just cut in and say one thing. Tulsi later goes on to say that they could fact check that he said that. I did just a quick search, just so I could try to get to work on this video. And the immediate thing it took me to was a mainstream media website, and it said, "Oh, she's misrepresenting." I have not seen his actual quote, so I don't want to make too much judgment on what he supposedly did or did not say yet. But either way, I can see both sides of the point here. So, since there is a drug problem, do I see there being an issue with perhaps our military assisting Mexico? I get the logic behind it, but I've still got to go with Team Tulsi on this one. The United States military needs to be protecting the United States. Now, you could argue that that is an imminent issue to the United States, so you may have some leeway with that. With that being said, especially since that's a country that's our neighbor, basically. Okay, but nonetheless, if he's proposing just sending our troops into Mexico to occupy and not to invade, but to just stay there and build bases there to help fight the cartels, we don't need another base that's going to last for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. That we don't need. Because you know why? It's going to cost a lot of freaking money. That's even more money to pump into the military-industrial complex. It's not going to be a quick get in, focus on the mission, take care of our goals, and then when we've done what we need to do, pull out. No, these things, they never end. They never end. And that is a strategy that is utter crap, pure and simple. Now, let's hear all about how miserable it was and how much of a stain Tulsi Gabbard put on the party because she sat down with Assad. Continue, Mayor Pete.
Assad. I have, in my experience, such as it is, whether you think it counts or not, since it wasn't accumulated in Washington, enough judgment that I would not have sat down with a murderous dictator like that.
Congresswoman Gabbard, let me allow you to respond.
Thank you. You were asked directly whether you would send our troops to Mexico to fight cartels, and your answer was yes. The fact checkers can check this out. No. But your point about judgment is absolutely correct. Our commander-in-chief does need to have good judgment. And what you've just pointed out is that you would lack the courage to meet with both adversaries and friends to ensure the peace and national security of our nation. I take the example of those leaders who have come before us, leaders like JFK, who met with Khrushchev, like Roosevelt, who met with Stalin,
like Donald Trump,
Reagan, who met like Reagan.
Even Tulsi had to stop and give him a look on that. That was so low and cheap. That was so cheap, man. We'll get back to this in a minute.
Reagan, who met and worked with Gorbachev. These issues of national security are incredibly important. I will meet with and do what is necessary to make sure that no more of our brothers and sisters in uniform are needlessly sent into harm's way fighting regime change wars that undermine our national security. I'll bring real leadership and experience to the White House.
I've got to respond.
Okay, so let's break this down. Mayor Pete, if you're out there somewhere, listen to me just a moment, okay? I want to enlighten you on something, son, okay? So, please, open your mind, open your ears, and shut your mouth. Just a moment. And for all of you people who think he had the right message, please do the same thing. Just a moment, okay? The role of our government is to protect this country. Okay? However, it is not to protect this country by taking its citizens who have enlisted in a military, sending them all around the world to wage wars, more and more and more and more and more by the year, basically, in the sense you will get along with our country, you will be a friend to our country, or we're going to beat you with a freaking stick. That is not the goal, and that is not the role. Well, excuse me, it may be the goal of the government, but it's definitely not the role of our government. Okay, Pete? So in other words, as a president, when the opportunity presents itself for you to sit down with a foreign leader, even if it's one that we get along with like cats and frickin' dogs, man, you better be sitting your ass down to try and reach a peaceful solution that avoids war. A politician could also be viewed as what's called a diplomat. Now, diplomat, what is that kind of a root word for? Diplomacy. You use diplomacy. You use diplomacy with other countries. And do you know what war is? It is a last resort when all diplomacy has failed. So, my friend, you have this whole thing ass backwards. Completely wrong. Completely backwards. You don't start with war because you think they're not worthy of diplomacy. No, you dumb fool. You start with diplomacy, and if they are not willing to try and work a peaceful solution out and have nothing but ill will towards this country and attack it or try to, and we have no other choice, we must defend ourselves. That's the last resort. You try and reach a peaceful solution first. Use diplomacy. Pure and simple. And the low blow shot, when she starts going through the history of our leaders that met with other leaders in the world to try and reach peaceful solutions, like Kennedy and Khrushchev, or as she points out, even Reagan and Gorbachev. Okay? They were doing the right things, trying to end the Cold War. Okay? That's the right frame of mind. And what does he do? Like Trump and Kim. Well, guess what? Okay, let's break this down. You corporate Dems, we've been at war with North Korea for how long? How long? For God's sakes, we were sitting on what? A ceasefire for 50 years? Staring each other down every day at the DMZ? Tensions high? One person crossed the line and boom. So what, Pete? We're just supposed to keep this thing going. May I remind you, Pete, that when Trump took office, the North Koreans were still hostile at us. When Obama was in office, the North Koreans were still hostile at us. And they're probably still hostile at us now, but at least they're not launching missiles, at least nowhere near the rate they used to. I think they launched a short-range missile some time ago. But they're not firing things over Japan down into the ocean anymore. They're not doing things like that, Pete. So I don't care what your view of Trump is. I don't care if you think he's a, obnoxious big cheese puff with yellow hair. I don't care what your view of Trump is. This is one thing that Donald Trump has done right. And he hasn't sold out our allies to try and work on a solution with North Korea. He's simply just trying to work something out to avoid all the conflict. And you corporate Dems want to make it out to be a bad thing. I'm sorry. Forgot. You're paid to promote war. Sorry. Slipped my mind. You had someone paying you, and now if he were to work something out and we get on the right page with North Korea, it would look very dumb for you to then go and invade them and stir the pot and cause a bunch of trouble. You need those tensions to be high so you can shoot your little missiles and go to war, right? Yeah, of course. Because you're all a bunch of frickin' warmongering jackasses. Pure and simple. Pure and simple. Okay? So to take a shot like that thinking that you're insulting her, no. I know there's a lot of people who disagree with Trump sitting down with Kim Jong-un. I'm not one of them. We need to be exercising diplomacy. Does it mean we should sell out our own country in the sake and the name of diplomacy? No. But But you have to try. You have to try. It is your job as part of the government to try and reach diplomacy and try to take the road of peace first. But to just bypass that because you think someone's too evil and too corrupt that we shouldn't try that method first, that is exactly why you should not be the president of the United States and why Tulsi is 10 times a better candidate and would make 10 times a better president than someone who doesn't want to take the road of peace and diplomacy like you. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Independent Report. If you liked the video, please give us a thumbs up and like the video. Also, if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to ask or topics you'd like us to cover, please drop a comment in the comment box below. And also, please subscribe to the channel. And if you do subscribe, ring that bell so you'll stay up to date when we drop new videos and you'll get notifications of it. And also, please support us on Patreon. Funds are going to be used to grow and improve this channel so we can reach more and more people and spread the message that the mainstream media doesn't want to tell people. We hope you'll tune in next time.